The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradiobreathing.org.
Hello, this is Laura, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the June 21st issue of the New York Times Style section on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The glitchy, gloppy look of now. After years of corporate millennial blanding, consumer culture oozes into shape for a new generation. By Callie Holterman. Remember how things looked in 2016? Direct-to-consumer brands like Warby Parker and Everlane introduced themselves in tidy sans serif typefaces. Pastels, especially millennial pink, surged onto Instagram feeds and glossier mascara tubes. A self-aware, stylized blandness called normcore inspired art kids to reach for the drabbest of khakis. The overall effect was sterile but soothing, as if to suggest our lives might somehow absorb the cheerful legibility of a Casper mattress ad. Fast forward a decade, and this muted visual language, which came to be known as millennial blanding, has receded. Something mishappen and unruly is rising in its place. Let's call it hypergoo, a style of glitchy, gloppy maximalism that has landed on consumer culture like a wet sneeze. Text on shampoo bottles and pickle jars increasingly resembles the inner workings of a lava lamp. Negative space has grown cluttered with doodles that look as if they might have been made in Microsoft Paint. The look involves an uncanny mashup of surreal smoothness and digital degradation, with the saturation cranked up high enough to startle Lisa Frank. The pastels that were ubiquitous a decade ago aimed to reassure an earlier generation that they could use their limited spending power to optimize their lives. Hypergoo does the opposite, reflecting back to Gen Z the distortion of the world in which they are coming of age. You see it everywhere that advertisers are jockeying for young eyeballs. In grocery stores, Solinet bottle minimalism is making way for hot pink snack bars with bulbous topography. At vape shops, Slim Jewels have been usurped by nicotine delivery devices that look like radioactive gumdrops with Tamagotchi-style screens. Apple ads are suddenly hospitable to plump letter forms and impish blue monster mascots. Anyone driving through the California desert on the way to Coachella would have passed a billboard for the Gen Z girl group Cat's Eye that seemed to have been made with leftover Nickelodeon slime. Viewers have grown suspicious of anything that looks too polished, said Gail Ader, the creative director of Grown Kid, a social club for 18 to 24-year-olds. His event invitations are pixelated in the manner of his favorite childhood computer games and often feature a nasty shade of green. Even the White House is sending out chaotic lo-fi memes, he pointed out. The clean look that once signified sophistication now reeks of venture capital funding, or worse, artificial intelligence. The worse it looks, the better it performs, he said. It's not just that the visual hallmarks of the direct-to-consumer boom have grown stale. Its standard bearers are being toppled by cultural headwinds. Last month, Everlane, once synonymous with sustainability, was acquired by the fast fashion giant Shein. Allbirds has pivoted away from lace-up sneakers and toward computer chips and AI. Brent David Freeney, founder of the design studio Special Offer and the architect of Charlie XCX's Brat album art, was never a fan of the uniformity of the mid-2010s. Brands took visual cues from tech platforms, resulting in a look that was streamlined but bloodless. I always use the term the sweet greenification of Manhattan, he said. Everything was designed to look like an app. In response, companies, especially those courting Gen Z, have spent the past several years trying to make themselves appear louder and more irreverent, said Elizabeth Goodspeed, a graphic designer and adjunct professor at the Rhode Island School of Design. They have clustered around a handful of similar tropes. The squishy topography, Goodspeed says, calls back to the candy and drink packaging of the 1970s. Some feel like typical modernist sans serifs inflated with a bit too much air, while others are more like a traditional script that's been sitting out too long on a hot day, she wrote in 2022, in an early reflection on the trend. She pointed to the logo of Skims, Kim Kardashian's shapewear company, and the packaging of Coot chocolate bars. You don't want to do the sans serif anymore, but you also can't do a script because that just does not hold up well when it has to be shrunk down to an icon on Instagram, she said. Today, Gen Z designs may be partly a product of the modern web, but they also gaze back wistfully at the internet of the 1990s and the early 2000s, which young people barely glimpsed before it disappeared. Their nostalgia has taken the form of spinning GIFs, novelty cursors, and Windows XP graphics, a hodgepodge of anachronistic elements that Goodspeed describes as GeoCities new, after the early web hosting surface. See also the cover of My First Book by Honor Levi, promotional artwork for the singer-songwriter Audrey Hobart, websites for clothing brands like Praying, and online ceramics. This is how you remember the internet looking before everything was polished and 3D and incredibly smooth, Ader 23 said. The palette is searingly anti-pastel, made up of shades like sour lemon lime, hyperlink blue, and pinks that might have tempted the pop artist Peter Max. All that saturation is no coincidence, said Freeney, who said he sifted through 500 shades to find brat green. Designers once needed to make sure that their color selections could be rendered online and with the 4 colors of ink used for most print products. But today's clients are mostly focused on standing out digitally, giving designers access to a wider range of hues that once would have fallen outside the safe zone. Naturally, everything always goes to the brightest, most acidic thing it could possibly be, Freeney said. Across categories, the pendulum seems to have swung away from austerity and toward playfulness. When Julie Schott co-founded the pimple patch company, Starface, in 2019, her sources of visual inspiration included Sanrio, the Japanese company behind Hello Kitty, and Sesame Street. The company's patches are sold in round neon compacts, and its logo is made up of letters that look like birthday balloons. It's not quiet. It's not made to disappear. It's made to be expressive, she said. Perhaps a world of childlike fantasy is a tempting alternative to the anxiety and disillusionment that come with being a young person today. But some of the design gestures that made Starface feel fresh a few years ago are now just slapped onto vastly different products as a shorthand for stuff Gen Z likes, Goodspeed said. She came across a meme whose creator had begged designers to stop using text that looked like something squirted out of a mayonnaise bottle. Society has progressed beyond the need for twee brand names with cute blobs of typography, it read, alongside pictures of sunscreen, coffee, and cauliflower puffs. Mian Chan, the creative director of Teen Vogue, says she sees another reason for the shift: the rise of AI. Imagery has viewers seeking evidence of human creation. For the past 3 months, Chan has been steering Teen Vogue through a redesign that emphasizes hand-drawn lettering and digital embellishments. It all goes back to this idea of personalization, she said. Right now, especially as every conversation is about AI, I was like, we need to inject more textural elements into this, she added. What once might have seemed overwhelming now reads as expressive, Chan said, pointing to labubus and other monster-like trinkets that dangle from the backpacks of young people. The look owes a lot to the colorful world of Japanese collecting culture. She brought up the concept of kimokawaii, which roughly translates to creepy cute. There's this idea that there's more depth than just being cute. It's kind of scary, kind of gross, she said. Of course, there is nothing stopping AI from aping its visual language. But the technology has not quite captured the sense of humor of an extremely online 25-year-old. Partiful, this event invitation service beloved by Gen Z, mostly gives its young graphic designers free rein to put out what they find funny, even if it does not look especially buttoned up. Often, the themes they come up with also trade in elements of Web 1.0, including Microsoft Word Art and The Sims. For us, and for a lot of other companies, we think that loud and messy and customizable and honestly unserious aesthetic, that's how you prove a human actually made this, said Shreya Murthy, the company's chief executive. Has that approach already hardened into a cliche? In 2021, a bottled water brand simply called Gen Z debuted a website that was pastiche of GeoCities. Visitors are greeted by a low-res cloud backdrop and a gif of seagull with massive biceps, ostensibly to convince them to buy an aluminum bottle of the most common liquid on Earth. Rian Harmon, a founder of Dayjob, the agency that designed the site, said that young customers are savvy enough to tell when they're being pandered to. He chose to get in on the joke instead. We want Gen Z to buy it. The website for Gen Z Water reads, before assuring visitors that its products are made by real boomers. It's good enough for the king. Is a second birthday right for you? A birthday is already an occasion for indulgence, so why not schedule one on your terms? By Louis Lucero II. King Charles III's life began, that is to say he was born, on November 14th, 1948. You might think that would make his birthday November 14th as well. And yet, on Saturday, some 1,400 soldiers filed past St. James's Park in the heart of London, marching in formation and hoisting banners in celebration of the British monarch's official birthday. Transposing a November birthday into mid-June is no run-of-the-mill rounding error, the way a friend might plan drinks on a Friday if her birthday happened to fall on a Wednesday. Rather, Charles was doing as his royal ancestors have done for over a century, exercising his divine right to observe his birthday while the sun is shining. It was Edward who came up with the idea of, well, let's sort of celebrate the monarch's birthday when the weather's nice, said the royal biographer Robert Hardman, referring to British kings from 1901 to 1910. Because monarchs do have a habit of being born in winter months, when it's all a bit gray. Like Charles, a true Scorpio king, Edward entered the world amid the damp chill of an English November. So, to better the odds of pleasant weather for trooping the color, the elaborate military parade that marks the monarch's birthday, he held his official birthday variously in May or June throughout his reign. The summer birthday swap. It's fit for a king. Is it right for you? For Robert Soto III, the answer is yes. Soto, a Brooklyn DJ known to friends and on flyers as Mama, spent the day that he turned 26 moving all his things out of his apartment and into a storage unit. My birthday day was actually very terrible, he recalled. Money was tight at the time, and he wasn't on especially good terms with several close friends. 6 months later, however, things were looking decidedly up. I had just gotten a new job, and things were going very right in my life, he said. And so I was like, wait, my half-birthday's coming. This could be fun. So he retooled a bi-monthly-ish comedy show dance party he hosts in Bushwick, dropped the cover, and rebranded the event a Very Mama Half Birthday. The party featured DJ sets heavily on Miami bass, Baltimore club, Y2K pop, and Beyonce. Vastly improved life circumstances aside, Soto said that he felt he could enjoy himself more simply because the day wasn't so freighted with expectation. With your birthday, I feel like there's a lot of pressure, he said. A half birthday, on the other hand, is just another day. To be clear, you can throw yourself a party whenever you like, but in terms of sheer making it about you-ness, no other occasion comes close to delivering the indulgent hit of a birthday. And not all birthdays are created equal. Just ask anyone who happens to share one with Jesus of Nazareth, December 25th, or the year itself, January 1st. Friends are often out of town and outdoor celebrations a teeth-chattering non-starter, to say nothing of the single presents pressed into double duty as combination gifts. Perhaps that is why off-date birthday celebrations are not the niche idea that many hosts might presume them to be. According to the digital invitation service Partyful, in the past 12 months, over 40,000 people said they were going to events with half-birthday or unbirthday in the name. Some non-birthday of note in the platform, next month, an 8.5-year-old whose December 23rd birthday requires that he always share the stage with Christmas will have a Christmas in July half-birthday barbecue, complete with summer games and water balloons. In April, a host solicited RSVPs to a half-birthday silent retreat. The month before, organizers planned an unbirthday bonfire in the Bay Area. The unbirthday, in particular, seems ripe for broader adoption by non-royals. The concept may be familiar today from the madcap tea party seen in Walt Disney's Alice in Wonderland. But the coinage first appeared in Through the Looking Glass, Lewis Carroll's 1871 children's novel, in which Humpty Dumpty boasts to Alice that his fetching cravat, or was it a belt, was in fact an unbirthday present from the White King and Queen. Alice is confused, but Humpty Dumpty explains the marvelous potential of the enterprise. There are 364 days when you might get unbirthday presents, he says, and only one for birthday presents, you know. An official birthday is, of course, just an unbirthday with a crown and scepter. So if your birthday happens to fall on an unbecoming date, there's no reason not to make like a royal and choose a day more to your liking. And remember, it's not a one or the other proposition. According to Hardman, the royal biographer and author of Elizabeth II in Private, in Public, Her Story, sovereigns still celebrate their actual dates of birth. It's simply more of an intimate affair. When the monarch has their real birthday, there are various gun salutes. You hear the national anthem played on Radio 4 in the morning, he said. You know, little things like that. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times Style section on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. When D.C. goes HGTV, President Trump brings a particular brand of reality TV-style renovations to the nation's capital. By Jesse McKinley. In a trope of home makeover shows, an unhappy homeowner looks around and wants to make some changes. Designers and contractors swoop in to try to fulfill their dreams as the clock ticks, and then complications ensue. Such is the scene in Washington in the age of Donald Trump, the builder president who has seemingly decided to overhaul not just his home, the White House, but the entire city around him, using the nation's capital as a canvas for his own particular brand of reality TV-inflected renovations. After generations of slow and often staid improvements, Trump has already added a splashy, outsized flair to today's Washington. Country club umbrellas in the paved-over Rose Garden, for example, and a temporary but massive Ultimate Fighting Championship octagon cage on the South Lawn, primed for a fight to celebrate the nation's 250th birthday. Such changes are reflective of his personal and political tastes. At the same time, however, the president's makeovers have also followed a tried-and-true storyline native to HGTV and other fix-it-up shows, according to veterans and students of that form. It's a very clean narrative. Dissatisfied homeowners come in, then there's a fixer, then things get better, said Inuji Kim, the author of The American Mirage, How Reality TV Holds Up the Myth of Meritocracy, adding that Trump knows the formula after years of hosting The Apprentice. And with HGTV rankings as one of the nation's most popular television channels, he knows that Americans are very familiar with it too, Kim said. While the dramatic reveal of the finished product is also a staple of the format, only a few of the president's second-term projects are complete, and many have faced bad press and legal challenges. That includes the Lincoln Memorial Reflecting Pool, which the president has had repainted American flag blue, and his massive new $400 million ballroom on the site of the demolished East Wing. Work there and elsewhere have been criticized by historians and questioned by federal judges, but such obstacles haven't dampened the president's enthusiasm. He is continuing to roll out plans for such projects as a 250-foot arch, recently approved by his hand-picked Commission of Fine Arts. Also, a so-called Garden of Heroes, complete with 250 life-size statues of famous Americans ranging from Sacagawea to Alex Trebek, and a planned makeover of the Kennedy Center, to which Trump already affixed his name. Last month, a federal judge ordered the president's name removed and temporarily blocked the plan to close the building for renovations. "I'm a really good builder," the president recently said, giving a tour of his ballroom's progress, adding, "I want to see Washington be beautiful." But Brian Balthazar, a veteran television producer and a former executive at HGTV, said some of Trump's plans could be seen as falling into a classic trap for many new homeowners, gutting things that may not need it. Often the question is, "Wow, is this renovation even necessary?" he said. And quite often, the answer is no. Balthazar said he also recognized another renovation pitfall in the president's makeover binge: the homeowner who insists they know best. Often the designer will explain to a client why something won't work. Perhaps what they want is disproportionate, for example. Frankly, a lot of the time homeowners will try and override the designer and win, said Balthazar. And that very well may be playing out on a national stage. Trump did, in fact, replace the original architect of the ballroom after they had multiple disagreements over issues like the ballroom's size, which already dwarfs other parts of the White House. And like many reality shows, the scope and price of many of the Capitol's projects have grown, as have questions about the funding of some of his beautification efforts. Recent investigations by the New York Times have shown that at least $67 million worth of national park entrance fees have been used, including at least $7 million for the Reflecting Pool, a no-bid contract that has an excessive profit margin for its contractor. Money plays a large role in many design shows or flipping shows, where property real estate is the goal. In Trump's case, money has also become an issue, including for some fellow Republicans who backed away from a proposal to set aside $1 billion for ballroom construction, seemingly recognizing that it threatened to become a political albatross. Polls show that both the ballroom and the Triumphal Arch are unpopular with voters. The White House defended the president's efforts. After decades of neglect, we finally have a president who is using his world-class business experience to beautify the crown jewels of our nation's capital, said Taylor Rogers, a spokesman for the president. President Trump is delivering on his campaign promise to restore the capital city of the greatest country in the history of the world to its proper glory. Some of the president's improvements have been hailed by locals, including the restoration of fountains across the city, including in Meridian Hill Park, north of the White House, a project which has even drawn praise from some Democrats. Signs reading, "We are making D.C. safe and beautiful," dot the city's center, as cranes have loomed over the White House and the adjacent Lafayette Park, which had been fenced off as part of a major rehabilitation. Nearby, other chunks of parkland have been cordoned off for parked construction equipment and supplies, including the tubs of blue paint used on the reflecting pool, a plan and color which alarmed some preservationists. "A reflecting pool is not a swimming pool," said Dr. Judy Scott Feldman, an art historian and the chair of National Mall Coalition, an all-volunteer nonprofit. Those aren't the only concerns. Indeed, Danielle Lindemann, a professor of sociology at Lehigh University and the author of True Story, What Reality TV Says About Us, said that legal challenges faced by Trump, including at the Kennedy Center, could also be seen as the sort of narrative roadblocks often used in reality TV. "The contractors are late. The tile isn't in stock." I don't think it's by design necessarily, as in, I don't think Trump is the architect of this narrative, but we do see those roadblocks in the form of legal constraints with the courts, she said. Then, too, there are the time, and in some cases term, constraints, with workers scrambling to complete the reflecting pool in time for the nation's 250th birthday on July 4th, all while dealing with scalding heat and stormy weather. On Wednesday, the Washington Post reported that crews might be working 20 hours a day on the arch, too. As for the ballroom, the president said its grand opening will be around September of 2028, just 2 months before the next presidential election. That year is also the target for the possible rebuilding and reopening of the Kennedy Center, which had been buffeted by artist cancellations and declining attendance after Trump overhauled its leadership and name. As any veterans of renovations can tell you, however, deadlines are often made to be broken. The truth is, you're at the mercy of how fast the paint dries, how fast the mud dries, said Katie Rudgan-Daigle, a renovation show producer and former HGTV executive, adding, "It doesn't matter who you are or what you're doing. You're facing the same thing because you're run by the human engine." Major renovations also sometimes face the cold reality that work done fast may not always be work done well, with multiple cases of home makeover shows being sued for shoddy work. They're under this time crunch, right? And so they're doing it in a way. They're cutting corners. They're maybe not relying on the most credentialed experts and best materials, Lindemann noted. And so then the crew leaves, and like half the kitchen island falls down. As for the psychology of why people renovate, both on TV and down the block, experts say that it often has much to do with keeping up with the times and the neighbors. In a recent Truth Social post about the ballroom, for example, Trump noted that China has a ballroom, and so should the USA. Sure enough, several other administrations have also grappled with the White House's need for more room for large events, noting that some state dinners have had to use tents to house all the guests. Remaining au courant, of course, might be a bigger challenge. Ask anyone who's ever gotten a new kitchen, Balthazar said. By the time it's done, it's almost time for a new one. The Pro-Tax Socialite, Julie Maclow's Unlikely Crusade, by Jacob Bernstein. Julie Maclow, an Upper East Side social fixture, settled into a corner table at Sistina, a canteen for billionaire business types such as Jamie Dimon and Mike Bloomberg, to chat about the rich. She was decked out in a $2,260 pink satin blazer from Philip Plain, along with a $1,820 matching drawstring trousers. She was sipping a whiskey that happens to be called the Macklowe, after its founder, her. It's basically a way to burn up money, Macklowe said of her venture, but it's great to see your cocktail on a menu. A week earlier, she had put her name on something else, an opinion piece in the Wall Street Journal with the headline, "A Wealthy New Yorker's Case for the Pied-à-Terre Tax." With it, she strode in her bedazzled Gucci sneakers directly into a debate about the taxes ultra-wealthy part-time city dwellers avoid. Rage at the uber-rich can be particularly acute in New York City, which has more Forbes billionaires than any place on earth. That rage helped fuel Zohran Mamdani's mayoral campaign. It led to populist protest of the Met Gala, which takes place just across from the Fifth Avenue triplex where Macklowe lives with her husband, Billy Macklowe, scion of a real estate clan. The Macklowes used to have one floor, but an upside to having really old neighbors, she said, is that each time one dies, she gets to expand. And a feeling that the rich aren't paying their fair share led to the foundation for a proposed tax on multi-million-dollar second homes. So there was something surprising about seeing someone in her exceptionally privileged circumstances defending the tax, arguing that people who enjoy a spritz at Saint-Omer's after a trip to the Frick also need to fund the subway. Particularly since Macklowe is proud to say she voted for Donald Trump 3 times and is no fan of the mayor. But attention-getting antics are a Macklowe specialty. In 2022, she hosted a fetish-themed party at Cipriani to celebrate her 45th birthday. Her husband arrived in full leather. She wore an outfit that Page Six described as a barely-there mesh and sequin creation. One minute, she's admitting that she's never been to a grocery store in her entire life and saying, "I can't even boil an egg." At Sistina, she opted for the $34 pear and arugula salad. The next, she's calling the current prices of Louis Vuitton and Prada offensive and pledging allegiance to the bevy of billionaire owners of fake Birkin bags. "Obviously, I own a fake Birkin," she said, "and there are women all over the Upper East Side walking around with them because I gave them to them." She calls opposition to abortion crazy, then uses a similar descriptor for the president, who did nominate 3 of the 5 justices who overturned Roe v. Wade. "He's a sheer lunatic," she said. Yet she likes that Trump has been a staunch supporter of Israel and has forged an allegiance with Elon Musk, whose work in space she applauds, citing climate concerns. "I believe we need to colonize Mars," she said. "We've got to go somewhere." As Macklowe tells it, there was a collective sense of civic duty that disappeared over the past decade. When the COVID pandemic shut down New York City, scores of rich people moved to Florida, where taxes were lower. Although benefit galas have returned to Manhattan, Macklowe said that influencers had replaced society swans. The Met Gala, where she used to pay what she calls the highest price for the worst seats, has become tacky, she said. The last time she attended was in 2019, and one of the few people she recognized was Jeff Bezos. She said she gave him a swig of whiskey from the flask beneath her dress. Last month, Bezos, who has a Manhattan pied-à-terre himself, said that the tax was a fine thing to do. Macklowe happened to agree, despite ordinarily being opposed to raising taxes on the wealthy. "This isn't a Republican or a Democrat thing," she said. "It is that people are getting a free ride off those who choose to live here and be New Yorkers, and the others pop in and pretend they are New Yorkers but don't actually pay any significant taxes." Shortly after Bezos went public with his views, Macklowe attended a dinner at the restaurant Caravaggio, thrown by Andrew Stein, a former Democrat politician who in recent years has swung right. At dinner, which began at 7:30, Stein was to her left. Woody Allen was to her right. He was, Macklowe said, falling asleep. "He was taking a rest," Stein, the host, said. Allen couldn't be reached for comment. Across from her was James Taranto, an editor of the Wall Street Journal. Macklow wound up talking to him about pied-à-terre owners and the taxes they avoid instead. I went on a rant about how they live here 170 days a year, and I live here 190, Macklow said. After Taranto suggested she write about her reviews, she went home around 9:30 p.m. and barricaded herself for 5 hours inside her walk-in closet, where her desk is located. I like that in my workspace I'm surrounded by clothes and handbags, she said, adding that, in fact, all but one of her 10 or so Hermes bags are real. By 7 a.m., she'd filed a draft. By 9 a.m., she was at the hair salon getting $600 highlights. She'd never written anything like it in her life, she said. Now the measure has passed and will go into effect next month. Macklow has had some discreet encouragement, she said, with one woman at her golf club in Bridgehampton whispering, "I agree with you about everything." She has also received a number of very unfriendly texts from very close friends who live in Florida. That's fine with her. "I'm an Aspen person," she said. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times Style section on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Taylor Swift didn't marry in Rhode Island. Fans showed up anyway. Despite reports pointing to New York as a potential Swift-Kelsey wedding location, Swifties still descended on Watch Hill, Rhode Island this past weekend, hoping for a glimpse of the singer or signs of a June 13th celebration. By Madison Malone Kircher. "She's here," said Lisa King, as she hustled alongside her 13-year-old daughter Sierra toward a local lighthouse on a gloriously sunny Saturday afternoon. The "here" was Watch Hill, the affluent seaside neighborhood in westerly Rhode Island, replete with members-only clubs, Gilded Age mansions, and ample souvenir shops selling crewneck sweatshirts and nautical keepsakes. The "she" was Taylor Swift. King, a 48-year-old from Bedford, New Hampshire, had booked the mother-daughter trip months ago after tabloid reports claimed the singer would wed the football player Travis Kelce on June 13th at the Ocean House, a luxury hotel where the sailcloth tent rental fee alone is $75,000. The reports, though unconfirmed, seemed plausible, said King, a commercial insurance broker and Swiftie. The singer, a numerology fanatic, had a long-standing fondness for the number 13. A June wedding would work with Kelsey's off-season, and perhaps most convincingly, Swift has owned a home in Watch Hill since 2013, when she purchased an 11,000 square foot cottage for $17.75 million. And Holiday House, as it's known, is just a stone's throw from the Ocean House. In 2020, Swift chronicled the life of the home's former owner, the oil heiress Rebecca Harkness, in the song The Last Great American Dynasty, drawing parallels between Harkness's star-studded parties and her own life. To some fans, a Watch Hill wedding seemed like a fate Swift had written herself, an Easter egg, a hallmark of the artist who is known to leave clues in her work for fans to be found. King and her daughter were walking to the lighthouse after a local shopkeeper told them she'd heard Swift's parents were spotted there earlier in the day. The duo knew it was a long shot. Earlier this spring, a wedding planner who previously planned Blake Lively's wedding to Ryan Reynolds came forward, claiming she was overseeing a June 13th wedding at the Ocean House and the bride was not Swift. More recently, tabloids have speculated the couple will wed in New York City in July. When they arrived at the lighthouse, no Swifts were to be found. There were, however, plenty of other Swifties. 4 women sat staring out the undulating Block Island Sound after being directed there by the same shopkeeper. The group, Trish Hippolito of Syracuse, New York, her sister Karen McCaffrey of Albany, New York, and McCaffrey's adult daughters, Tess and Emma, was on a sister-sister trip. They had booked an Airbnb months earlier, hoping to spy even just the flutter of a veil or a glimpse of a bridesmaid. "We had a source," said Hippolito, a 62-year-old retiree, describing a friend of a friend who claimed to have intel. "Turns out he's a liar," she added to laughter from the group, who had taken a similar trip to Toronto during the Eras tour, despite not having tickets. Next to the gated entrance of Swift's house is a path leading to East Beach, a long stretch of public oceanfront. After purchasing the property, Swift put up no trespassing signs, shored up the stone seawall, and added a chain-link fence, changes that drew some criticism. Before Swift bought the place, the wall was something of a hangout for locals. Similar grumblings resurfaced when reports began circulating that Swift and Kelsey might marry in Watch Hill. "I think the locals were a little annoyed," said Lainey Marcial, a recent graduate of Chiaro High School in Richmond, Rhode Island. "Like, oh, they're going to shut down the whole town." She was wearing a neon yellow vest and standing at her post at the path's entrance as a summer intern with the local police department. Colby and Braden Champlin, brothers and lifeguards on East Beach, also described old-timers with similar concerns, but added that Swift appears to keep a low profile when she's in town. Watch Hill is postage stamp tiny. You can lap the heart of it in 20 minutes if you walk fast and don't stop to ride the carousel, the oldest operating merry-go-round in the United States. "There's just one road in and one road out," said Danny Connell, a 41-year-old Lyft driver who lives in Westerly. On Friday evening at the bar 10 Sandwiches, a restaurant on the main drag, a couple at the bar said they had booked their hotel room back in December, hoping to catch a glimpse of the big day. "I came for her wedding, and she's not even here," said Ken Maletta, 87, from Ridgewood, New Jersey, adding that he and his partner visit a few times each summer. On Saturday, florists loading swaths of white hydrangeas into the Watch Hill Chapel drew onlookers. A large tent on the backside of the Ocean House also raised some speculation. Kathy Carano, 60, a realtor who lives in Fairfield, Connecticut, and owns a house in Watch Hill, said she had walked over to check out the scene. The tent's location struck her as unusual. Most weddings she had seen at the hotel were held on the croquet lawn next to the hotel, which is much more visible to passers-by. Multiple Ocean House employees declined to comment for this story. Instead, guests in tuxedos and gowns could be seen walking toward a large tent that was behind the hotel, overlooking the water. Across the road, a blonde bride, but not that blonde bride, emerged from a flower-decorated car at the Watch Hill Chapel. Kathy Legron, a 54-year-old sales executive from Hawthorne, New Jersey, was visiting for the weekend with 3 generations of Swifties, she said. "We thought this weekend could be her bachelorette weekend because of the Knicks matching T-shirts," Legron said, referring to Swift's recent appearance with the Haim sisters at Madison Square Garden. Down on East Beach, Becky Firth sat with friends and their children who had drawn Swift's initials and the number 13 in the sand. One of the children wore a T-shirt for the album, The Tortured Poets Department, declaring she had been a fan since birth. Firth, a 45-year-old ceramist from Duxbury, Massachusetts, whose family has a home in Watch Hill, said she expected Swift might marry at Ocean House, where Firth herself wed, but she doubted it would happen this weekend. "When famous folks are in town, it's hard not to notice." Last summer, she spotted both Kelsey brothers, the model Gigi Hadid, and the actor Bradley Cooper at Swift's home. As the sun began to set, a group of women sat on the sand chatting and listening to folklore. They had been friends for decades, meeting as neighbors when their children were little, said Maggie Henderson, 53, of Mystic, Connecticut. The group gets together annually for a beach day and picked this one, like many others in Watch Hill that day, hoping to hear wedding bells. Instead, they posed for a group photo in front of Holiday House. The sounds of a wedding MC drifted from the celebration beneath the ocean house tent nearby. If you listened closely, you could hear the faintest notes of a James Tyler song. Fitting, given that Swift was named after the singer-songwriter. It seemed the pop star had, without even trying, left one final Easter egg for fans on her not wedding day. Modern love. I have fallen in love with my doctor, but we have a huge age gap. By W. Blake Martin. I'm in love with my doctor, who happens to be 3 years old. Though I should explain that this love is the love of a father, as my doctor is also my son. After dinner, he dons his white jacket and stethoscope, toy syringe in his small hand. He rehearses the motions learned each time he's had a fever, asking me to tilt my head back and open wide, ensuring I drink the medicine. I pretend to spit it out, at which point he looks at me seriously and says, No, Daddy. Time for your medicine." He listens to my heart, looks into my ears with his toy otoscope, and, to my surprise, my nostrils. Then he brings out his plastic reflex hammer, the very tool that led to my diagnosis 9 months before he was born. He swings it against each of my kneecaps. "Your legs working good, Daddy?" he asks. "Yes. Why, thank you, Dr. Miles," I lie. Then I say, "You're a good doctor." He finishes his work and says, "All better, Daddy?" Half question, half statement. I nod. I bring him close and kiss his cheek. I learned I was sick the day after I learned I was going to be a father, Miles's father. It took nearly 2 years for my wife to become pregnant. We had almost stopped trying. In vitro fertilization was on the calendar just 3 weeks away. Then my wife took a test we assumed would be negative, as it had been countless times before. And we wept as we watched a blue line darken, indicating a positive result. Our first glimpse of a future that had felt increasingly impossible. We canceled the IVF appointment and kept our savings. We would need the money for diapers. The next day, another test result, also positive, but delivering a considerably less happy glimpse into the future. A week earlier, they'd taken my cerebral spinal fluid during my first overnight at the hospital, repeatedly puncturing my spine with a needle I didn't care to see. I curled into myself, hugging my knees to expose vertebrae as my wife sat beside me. Each errant attempt sent spasms down my legs. The resident apologized. I began to shake, and my wife began to cry. "This is the worst back massage I've ever had," I said, trying to staunch her tears. It almost worked. The resident and the wide-eyed medical student both laughed. My wife rolled her weary eyes and said, "Don't listen to him." Eventually, the attending physician arrived. To our relief, she got it right on the first try. A week before, I was in the same hospital. It's where I worked. I was in the final year of my PhD in clinical psychology and was an intern at the hospital on my last rotation before graduating. I knew these halls. I traveled them daily as part of the consultation team, wearing glorified work pajamas, black scrubs, and a fleece vest, my badge above the waist, signifying my role. But that day my scrubs were folded away as I donned a different version of pajamas. The outfit I had seen 1,000 times but never worn, a seafoam green hospital gown with a drawstring at the back, the uniform of the suffering. I tried to convince myself and the medical team that I don't belong in it, that I was not, in fact, sick. I sat on the couch instead of the bed, my badge clipped to the collar of my gown. I played the good patient. I smiled and made jokes. I told them about my wife's pregnancy after years of trying, as if there were an accounting to illness and healing, as if my resume, father-to-be, good-spirited colleague, would somehow merit me a cure. Instead, at 30, I was given a diagnosis without one: multiple sclerosis. I felt as though I'd been cast in a role I did not audition for, a role I am too young, too healthy to play. No, I wanted to explain to the director. This must be some kind of misunderstanding. You've got the wrong guy. I'm going to be a father. MS is a disease of mistaken identity. My immune system, believing there is an intruder, mounts a defense. But there is no intruder, no one to defend against. I tried to tell it this, but it doesn't listen. It goes on protecting against a phantom threat, and the efforts lead to holes in the wall of my spine, broken panes in the window of my brain. It attempts to keep my body safe and become the instrument of its undoing. I am used to suffering, just not my own. Emotional calluses are necessary. I was taught in graduate school because otherwise the pain would break you. For me, there is a safety in hiding behind the label of intern, psychologist, provider that we think will inoculate us from the pain we treat. Of course, there is no such divide. I was a provider, then a patient. Now I am both. We begin as visitors to these rooms. Eventually, we all become the visited. But my son doesn't know I'm sick. One of the benefits of being 3 is he doesn't understand much yet. He knows everything about Sesame Street, nothing about loss. He knows that on Saturdays I take him to music class with Miss Amy, and on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays he goes to school with Miss Karen. He also knows that each evening when I get home from work, we'll go through the sliding doors to the backyard where I will lift him skyward, the falling light resting on his hair and eyes. I want to prolong this innocence as long as I can. Let the world remain as simple as he sees it now, lifted in my arms, safe and untroubled, believing this is how the world is, how the world will always be. But this world will change. Eventually, he will learn that I am sick. How old will he be when my wife and I tell him? I think of my parents who told me about sex early on because they wanted me to hear it from them first. Will sharing my diagnosis with him be like that? A conversation of our choosing? Or will he notice on his own? Like when I saw my own father hiding eggs in the backyard and realized the truth about the Easter Bunny. Through the back window, I watched my father crouch near the playscape, tucking eggs under the slide and along the fence, and felt both disappointment and pride. The innocence of childhood, belief shifting into adult understanding. Will he pretend not to know, protecting me from the realization that he's crossed the threshold, just as I pretended to be surprised by those eggs the next morning? Will he tell his younger sister, or will she have to figure it out for herself? Or, worst of all, will someone else point it out to him? I think daily of this calculus. How long can I wait to tell him before it's too late? Before I risk the cruel kid on the playground asking him why I walk funny, pointing out something he did not notice about his own father. For now, he is unburdened by the concept of illness, of loss. Something I want to preserve forever. Something I can only preserve for now. Even if this story was not one of illness, it would still be a story of loss. No parent gets to keep their children forever. I know, nor the other way around. Instead, We exist in tandem for a time, drifting down the same river, before the current spins us away and down our own winding tributaries. He is only 3, this boy who made me a father. How can I expect him to remember me as I am now? And how many memories will I get of him? I find myself frantically collecting them, storing them each day, my fragile currency against loss, like the memory of my doctors visiting this evening. As the appointment ends, my boy packs up his medical kit, and we trade our roles as patient and clinician for those of father and son. I watch him take off his white jacket, and I have just one thought: how I wish he could heal me. Then he sheds the rest of his outfit in a frenzy, gets naked, and begins scampering around the house. He is cackling, zigzagging across the linoleum of our living room before we've even turned on his bath. I watch him run, delirious, full of light, and I realize how, in so many ways, he already has. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the June 21st issue of the New York Times Style section. Your reader has been Laura. Thank you for listening.
Coming up next in the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, we have the USA Today. Following that at 2 o'clock, it's episode number 7 of To Rescue the American Spirit by Bret Baier. Stay with us for these readings and more. You're listening to the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, broadcasting daily readings 24 hours a day of newspapers, magazines, and books to area people who are blind or have a print disability, who are provided reading radios. Radio Readings broadcast signal is provided at no charge by WNED. Radio Reading Studios are at 1199 Harlem Road in Cheektowaga, between William and Clinton Streets. Radio Reading's website is nfradioreading.org. For more information on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, call us at 716-821-5555.
The Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service now